Okay, so last time we spoke, I mentioned that I would be traveling for the next couple of vlogs. Do you guys remember where? Right, so Cleveland, Ohio, not exactly poker central by any means, but still a really cool city nonetheless, and one that I recommend anyone check out if you have the chance. Now, as far as live poker goes, there are some options, and by options, I mean just one place. Jack Casino, which is this building back here. Pretty much the only place to play poker for like 100 miles, I think. Now, this place is pretty cool and unique because it's actually built inside of an old department store that used to be called Higbee's. Because of that, it's multi-leveled and all the levels are connected through escalators, which is pretty different and kind of cool, I think. As far as their actual poker goes, they get a bunch of 1-3 tables every single day and the occasional 2-5. In my last video, I mentioned I would be here today, Friday, trying to start a 5-10 no limit, but I kind of doubt that'll actually go. So I'll probably end up playing 2-5. Hopefully that goes at least. Anyhow, that's enough rambling. You guys don't really want to hear me talk. You want to see me play cards. So I'm going to go do just that. Let's go. So upon entering the poker room, I was greeted with some very good news. First, the 5-10 would indeed be going since there were around 15 people that wanted to play it. And secondly, their structure was a 500 minimum, no maximum buy-in. So for that reason, I decided to sit down with $10,000. I don't really get the chance to play Uncapped in California, so I figured why not? Anyway, in the first hand of note, I look down at Ace-Queen, raise it up to $30 and get called by just the button. We go heads up to a flop of Queen Jack 7 with 2 diamonds. So we flop a pretty strong hand, but on a board with plenty of draws to get some value from. So for that reason, I size up a little bit here, make it $55, and my opponent calls. Turn card's not really my favorite, it's the 8 of hearts. Even though this card completes 10-9, and I guess adds a few 2-pair combinations, I think there's still plenty of worse hands to get value from. So I continue betting, put in a bet of $115. If I get raised, I think it's going to be a relatively straightforward fold, but my opponent decides on just a call. So we're off to see one last card here, which is the King of Clubs. And at this point, I don't think there's that much value in betting for a third time, so I decide to check and see what my opponent does. But he does not agree with the check. Instead, he puts out $255. And I don't know, it's kind of a close spot, but I think it's mostly going to be a fold here. We don't really beat that much, and it seems unlikely that he's bluffing too often on this run out. So I think it over for a bit and decide to let it go. In the next one, we are 5-handed. I put on the $20 straddle, and we see an open from the cutoff to $60. Action folds all the way to me, and I look down at 3 deuce of spades. Certainly questionable to continue here, but of course, that's what I decided to do. So we're off to a flop here, which is 9-5-4 with 1 spade. Probably the best 3 high that we can ask for. So when I check it to him and he puts in a bet of $75, we have a decent amount of equity with an open-ended draw and absolutely 0 showdown value, obviously. So I'm going to play this a bit more aggressively and check raise, just like I would with a set or 2 pair in this situation. So I go up to 275, and he thinks it over for a second before making the call. We're off to a turn card here, which is the 10 of hearts, and the plan hasn't really changed here. So I asked myself how much I would bet if I had a strong hand, and decided that that number is probably $600. So that's what I decided to bet, and after thinking it over for about a minute, the cutoff eventually lets it go. So nice to get this one through. In the next one, action folds to me on the button, and I look down at Ace-8 offsuit. Probably one of the worst hands I'll be opening from the button, but still one that I'll be raising nonetheless. So I make it $30 and get called by both the small blind and big blind. So 3 ways here to a flop of 8-6-4 with 2 diamonds. Action checks to me, and although I think it's totally fine to bet here, this is a board where my opponents will be connecting a fair amount, and getting check raised would kind of suck. So this time I decided to mix it up a little bit and check it back, see what they decide to do on the turn, which comes a 4 of spades. probably one of the best cards we could ask for. So when the small blind leads $45 and the big blind folds, I'm more than happy to make the call. River card is the jack of spades. Shouldn't really change much aside from, I guess, maybe like a jack high flush draw now makes top pair. So when the small blind bets $225, even though it's a fairly big sizing, he's going to have a lot of missed draws, and we also have one of the best hands that we could have in this situation, given how the hands played out. So I make the call. Unfortunately, this time we're up against it when the small blind shows pocket sixes. A slightly better hand than ace-8 offsuit is ace-king, and especially when it's the suited variety. And that's what I pick up in this next hand. I raise it up to $30 first to act, and face a raise from the button to $90. When the action gets back to me, I'm definitely going to be putting in yet another raise, being out of position and having one of the best possible hands in No Limit Texas Hold'em. So I make it $275 to go. My opponent ponders it over for a bit before making the call. My opponent started this hand with around $2,500, so plenty of money left to play for, and fingers crossed that we find a good flop. Bam, there it is. Ace King 9 with 2 clubs. Pretty rare situation where you're going to put in a re-raise pre-flop with ace king and flop top 2 pairs. But I just try to play it cool and bet $200, much like I would with pretty much all my holdings here. And my opponent makes the call. Turn card is the Queen of Hearts, which I think is actually a pretty good card because he wouldn't really have pocket queens after calling on a flop, but he could easily have a hand like ace queen or maybe king queen suited. So I'm just going to continue betting here, this time to the tune of $550. And once again, he makes the call, so pretty sizable pot brewing here. The only hands I'm sort of worried about is pocket nines or maybe jack 10 of clubs, but those holdings don't seem too likely. And when the river card comes the 9 of diamonds, obviously pocket nines is even less likely now. And jack 10, I mean, if he's got that, here's my money. Anyway, at this point, my opponent's got around $1,400 behind. Nothing left to do here but shove all in, so that's what I do. Unfortunately, this time he lets it go fairly quickly. Later on that night, he told me he actually had king-queen suited, so the river sort of killed our action, if you will. Whatever, still happy to win a big pot early on. In the next one, we see an early position open to $30. There's a caller in middle position, and I look down at pocket kings on the button. I raise it up to $130, and only the original raiser makes the call. So we're off to a flop here, which comes jack 3 deuce with 1 spade and 2 hearts. He checks it over to me, and yet again, this is one of those boards that I'd be betting pretty much all my holdings for around 30% of the pot, so this time is no different. I put in a bet of $90, and my opponent makes the call. We're off to a turn card here, which is an interesting one. It's the ace of diamonds. He checks it over to me once again, and now there's one of the cards on the board that's bigger than the pair I have in my hand, so I decide to check it back. And the river is the queen of hearts. Now he comes out and leads for $325. Fairly big bet, around 2/3 the size of the pot. And even though I've got some very nice cards in my hand, they're actually some of the worst that I would have in this situation. There's plenty of aces that I would check back on the turn. I would have pocket queens at some frequency, also maybe pocket jacks, and just a bunch of other stuff that is actually better than pocket kings here. So now that the turn was an ace and the flush arrived on the river, I think it's actually correct to just let this one go. I don't think about it too long, and unfortunately kings go into the muck this time. In the next hand, we're playing a $25 bomb pot, and I look down at queen jack on the button. The flop comes down queen 9-4 with 2 clubs, and action checks all the way to me. I've got a queen in my hand, and there's a queen on the board, so I'm going to put some money in the pot. I make it $50, and only the big blind makes the call. Turn card is the king of spades, and even though in the last hand, when an overcard came to my pair, I decided to check it back, in this situation it's a lot different because I feel like we could get called on the flop with a lot of middle pair holdings or possible straight draws, maybe some flush draws. So this time when he checks it over to me, I think there's actually quite a bit of value in continuing to bet since I would expect him to almost never have a king in this situation. So that's what I do. I put $200 into the pot, and once again, my opponent makes the call. River card is the 7 of diamonds, and once again, he checks it to me. This time, I don't think there's a lot of value in betting, so I check it back, and unfortunately, my opponent's got king 9. Kind of sucks because that is one of the very few ways I would expect him to have a king in this situation. So queen jack is no good this time, and we are not going to be taking down this bomb pot. In this next one, we look down at the most pretty hand you could ever imagine, pocket aces. What's not a pretty sight though is action folding all the way to me in the big blind. Fortunately, there's a straddle on this hand, so there won't be any chopping. I raise it up to $60, and the straddler makes the call. So we're off to a flop here, which comes down 9-9-6 with 2 spades. I put in a continuation bet of $90, expecting to get called by a ton of stuff, since this is pretty much blind versus blind, but my opponent does not call. Instead, he decides on a raise, all the way up to $325. He's got around 3,000 or so left in his stack, so nothing to do here but proceed with a call. There is a little bit of concern on my end that my opponent could have a 9, but when the turn comes the 9 of clubs, seems even less likely now, so I check it, planning on calling pretty much any sized bet. Unfortunately, this time my opponent checks it back. River card is the 4 of diamonds, doesn't really change anything, and something I like to do in these situations is ask myself, what would I do if I had absolutely nothing here, like 8-7, which completely missed, or a missed flush draw, something like that. And I think the correct play here is to actually overbet. I expect him to have a full house here fairly often, maybe a hand like a 6, or pocket 7s, pocket 8s, maybe even pocket 10s or jacks at some small frequency, and it would be pretty difficult to get those hands to fold if we did have a bluff. So, for all those reasons, I think with value, we should be doing the exact same thing. And let's be honest, it's also really fun to bet huge once in a blue moon. So, that's what I do this time. Throw in a bet of $1,200, and my opponent starts thinking it over for a while before eventually deciding on a fold. Some of you might think that was a little bit greedy, and I guess I wouldn't disagree with you. The very next shuffle, the cutoff opens to $60, and I look down at pocket jacks this time in the small blind. Definitely going to be putting in the raise, so I make it $240, and the cutoff makes the call. The flop comes down queen 10-5 with 2 clubs. I'm sure you guys probably know that I'd want to bet small in this situation, and there it is, a $160 bet, which my opponent decides is more than okay with him as he proceeds with a call. Turn card is the 10 of diamonds, pretty clear check now, so that's what I do. And this time my opponent decides on a bet, but it's a very small one, less than a third of the pot, $225. This is a spot where we want our decision making to be dependent on the sizing that we're facing. Against such small sizing, I think it's a pretty crystal clear call. Plus, he could also have like smaller pocket pairs that bet for protection, since I could easily be playing ace-king this way. So I proceed with a call, and we're off to see one last card, which is the 6 of hearts. Once again, I check it. This time my opponent checks it back, so I expect to have the best hand fairly often here, but wrong answer. We're up against king, queen of hearts. Seems like pocket aces are a little bit easier to play than pocket jacks, so in this next one, I decide to revert back to those cards, this time in the small blind though. The straddle is on, so I raise it up to $60, and only the straddler makes the call. So we're off to a flop here, which is queen 9-7 with 2 spades. I decide to get a little bit sneaky this time and play it as a check. The straddler bets $75, and I proceed with a call. Turn card is the 9 of diamonds, so now there's plenty of draws on the board. Once again, I check it though. This time my opponent checks it back. I think once he checks it back on the turn, he's going to be a lot more showdown value driven, since if he was planning on bluffing, he would definitely be betting this turn card. So when the river comes the queen of hearts, I'm really not happy to see that card, obviously. I feel like it's very likely my opponent could have a queen, given that he bet the flop and then decided to check back the turn. So once again, nothing to do but check it, I think. And my opponent bets $250. Similar to the last hand with jacks, I think this is a spot where we should be heavily factoring what bet size we're facing when trying to make a decision. And against pretty big sizing like this, I think it's fine to let this one go. So that's what I ended up doing. However, the reason I don't think that's actually good is because we just have one of the strongest hands that would play this way. And if we're folding this hand in particular, we're probably over folding a little bit here. Anyway, no time to sulk on that, because the very next shuffle, the cutoff opens to $60, and I look down at ace-king on the button. Happy to put in the raise here, so I make it $200. Action folds back to my opponent, and he makes the call. We're off to see the first 3 cards, which come down king 9-4 with 2 hearts. Cutoff checks it over to me, and anytime I flop a pair with ace-king, I'm pretty happy to put money in the pot, so I put in $140, and my opponent makes the call. Turn card doesn't look too good. It's the 7 of hearts completing the flush. He checks it over to me, and even though I don't expect him to have a flush too often, I think it's fine to just check here and see what he wants to do on the river. So we're off to see one last card, which is the queen of diamonds. Again, not really a card that I love, since one of the few hands we were beating, king queen, now obviously destroys us. So when he leads out for $425, getting a little sick of it at this point, but once again, I think the play is to fold. Silver lining is my opponent was nice enough to show it for the vlog. King, queen of spades. So not the easiest of sessions so far, but that's alright. We're going to press on, this time with 7-6 of diamonds in the straddle. We see a limp from under the gun, which is also the cutoff in this situation, as we were 5-handed. And I think for the most part, just checking here is completely fine, but this guy in particular had been indulging in quite a few cocktails, so I'd like to play a raised pot with this gentleman. I make it 80 bucks to go, and as expected, he makes the call. Flop comes down 8-5 deuce rainbow with no diamond, so we flop an open-ended straight draw, but that's about it. Still happy to continue betting though, so I make it $90 to go, and my opponent makes the call. Turn card is the 5 of spades, which kind of sucks because I would almost never have a 5, so I think it's just time to check it. However, things kind of change when my opponent quickly flicks in $150. Given the speed at which he did this and his body language, etc., I got the vibe that he did not have a very strong hand in this situation. I know you shouldn't base every decision based on that, but it is a small factor, and in this particular hand, it definitely played a part, at least for me. So, even though I was pretty much done with the hand, I'm back. Can't really call out a position with 7 high, so I decided to take the aggressive route and check raise to $450, and just trying to get my opponent to fold, which he decides, nah, that's not a good idea. He flicks in the 300 more, and we're off to see one last card, which does not bring any help. It's the King of Hearts, and I mean, there's only one way we're going to win this one now, right? My line doesn't make a ton of sense, but this hand is a little more street poker than the others, and I just think my opponent's not that strong. So I decide to throw in 1,000 bucks and hope for the best, and my opponent goes in the tank, thinking it over for about 30 seconds, then a minute. I'm pretty nervous, but on the surface, I look calm and ready to drop bombs, but I keep on forgetting that my opponent eventually decides on a fold. Very nice, we get this one through, even though it very easily could have been a disaster. In the last hand of the night, the button opens to 60 bucks, and I look down at ace queen in the small blind. The button is going to have a ton of hands in this situation, so ace queen rates to be the best hand. For that reason, I decided to raise it up to $240. Now the big blind, who is the same player from last hand, decides to call, and the button, who was the initial raiser, gets out of the way. A little bit strange, the developments so far, but that's quite alright as we go to a queen 10-5 flop. I decide to keep betting, this time to the tune of $165. And once again, the big blind's got something special for us in store, as he raises it up to $350. Pretty much a min raise. He's got around $700 behind, and it's a question of whether we just want to get it all in here or call and hope that he goes all in on the turn after I check it to him. I decide to feed him a little bit of rope in this situation and just proceed with a flat call and just hope that the turn is a clean card, which indeed it is. It's the 3 of spades. So I check it over to him, fingers crossed that he rips all the money in there. Unfortunately, he decides to check it back this time. Not really sure what's going on at this point, but when the river card comes to Queen of Hearts, checking doesn't seem too great here. If he's got a queen, he's obviously going to call, and if he was raising the flop with a hand like pocket jacks or pocket nines, I think he's pretty likely to call it off here. Not really wanting to see him check back one of those hands, I decide to rip it all in, but unfortunately he lets it go. So I'm not really sure what he had. Maybe like King Jack suited? I don't know. Who am I kidding? I have no idea what people are doing most of the time. Anyway, still happy to take this one down. And this was actually the last hand of the night, since at this point I'd been playing around 8 hours or so. So I decided to rack up, call it a night. And as always, I hope you guys enjoyed the hands. So this is my hotel, and if you guys just saw the walk I took, it's connected to the casino through like a city center, town hall, shopping mall type. But anyway, enough about random hotels that you guys probably don't care about. Today I ended up playing maybe 8 hours or so and won around $1,000, maybe just a little over that. Last vlog, I booked some ridiculous $7,000 win. But this was a lot more realistic today, which I like to capture on the vlog sometimes because, you know, it's more representative of what you're going to find day to day playing 5-10. The game itself was kind of lame, to be honest. It was just a bunch of regulars and there wasn't a ton of action to be had. But That's all right. I was just happy that there was a 5-10 game at all to play in. Anyway, that's going to conclude this vlog. What's coming up is Detroit, Michigan. That's going to be a separate vlog though, and you guys won't see that for probably like, you know, a few days at least. So if you guys are interested in that, I'll be playing at MGM Grand. I'll be jumping into a 5-10 game if they have one. If not, I'll play 2-5, which I believe is 1,000 max. This guy right here just walked all the way up to me to ask me if I know where the restrooms are. I'm wearing a ridiculous beanie and a Milwaukee shirt. Do I look like I work here? It's like 1 in the morning. That's enough rambling. I'm tired. I'm gonna go to bed. It's a long drive tomorrow. So thank you so much for watching. Thanks for all the support. Thank you if you gave this video a thumbs up. And I gotta go before this guy comes back. All right, see you guys later. Good luck at the tables. Peace.